Hello, my name is Michael Ray. I'm the director of the American Indian Program here at New Mexico State University. We thank you for joining us on our digital platform, as we would have been having some events here on our campus, but at the current moment, we're just not able to. So thank you for joining us once again. Enjoy the event, and we'll see you again soon. Badoni from the Department of Anthropology. Dr. Badoni.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Making sure my microphone's on. Yeah, to add on to the housekeeping, there are going to be some noises. I've got two boys that are out of school, so you're going to probably be here, possibly the door, someone banging on the door, someone screaming, just a mess. And there might be a kid that ends up sitting on my lap, a kid that ends up pulling my hair, something. So please don't be alarmed. It's just like everyday isolation behavior in this house. So let me go ahead and start with my slides. So again, Yate, nice to see everyone's face. I'm so glad to anytime when I can interact with somebody other than a child or my husband, it's I'm like, hey, talk to me. I feel desperate for interactions. I think that's what's happening, how I'm handling this this isolation process in the meantime. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for joining us today. I am just going to talk a little bit about my background. I'm Diné and Navajo Nation. I am Natotene Trachini, that is my mother's clan, and I am born for the Kintlachini, Bipitwane Tashiche, and Kinyaane are my Nalis. Oh, there, see, did you see that? Yes, he's down here. He's hiding. He's hiding down here under the table. Yeah, so this is how it's going. I haven't figured out, of course, like how to let him be a kid when I'm in the process of doing Zoom meetings. But yeah, he doesn't seem to affect his life very much. He has his own Zoom meetings, and maybe that's what he's hiding down here. Yes, okay, there's my slides, yes. So yes, this is my first academic year at NMSU with the Department of Anthropology. I'm in Native American Studies. Dawn is my colleague, Dr. Pepion. We work together on the program, serving Native students, but also beyond Native students. And this has definitely been a very interesting first year, as far as like how we are teaching from what currently our teaching status, everybody. And you know, I'm a very extroverted person. I love the interactions that I have with students, and I thrive on that. And what's going on with the isolation has been really difficult. So I'm trying to get a little bit more grounded in like the self-care is very important for me right now. But yeah, I've been taking on different activities when it comes to dealing with this. So let me go ahead. Okay, so here we go. This is my introduction. This is how I identify and I introduce myself in my language in Diné. So Nat Otene Trachini Nishle. So that is who I am. That is my maternal clan. This is Lane Bashashin, which means I'm born for. This is my dad right here, looking very cool in the aviator glasses. And this is my grandfather on my mother's side, Bipitwane Dashiche. And I didn't get a chance to meet him. He passed way before I was born. And this is my father's father, Kinyaane Dashinale. And of course, I didn't get a chance to meet him. This is my grandmother right here. This is my grandma. This is a protest. This is protecting. This is an act of resistance for the Navajo Hopi Land Dispute and Relocation Act that was happening well before I was born, and well into when I became a teenager, when it actually became a reality that we had to be forced off of our homelands. And this is where I'm from. This is out on the northeastern Navajo reservation. This is where I grew up. This is where I was born. T'isiatwo is the Navajo word for it. In English, it is Blue Canyon. That's what it is identified as. And this is where I really come from. I'Sinnansha, which is, this is where I really, really come from. And I was part of the forced relocation very, very early on in my childhood. It was, like I'd mentioned, that it happened way before I was born. So all these political movements and federal policies that were happening way before I came to exist. So when we were forced off our land, which was at age 6 or 7, we moved to Flagstaff. And Flagstaff is my hometown. That's where I started. That's where I started public schools. I was there through the public school systems. Did my undergraduate at my undergrad program at NAU, Northern Arizona University. So that's how I was forcibly removed from my homelands on. This is my mother right here. Some of the research that I've done in Indian education, historical and contemporary, is looking through some of my research. I was able to find a picture of my mom in one of the books that I was using, which I thought was really interesting, because we're flipping through and she's like, I think that's me. So when I talk about like where I come from and all these federal policies and all these forced relocation that was happening around me, it was also my family was also part of the boarding school era. And my mom, why she was part of the book, was there was one of these pilot programs where you can have on reservation schools. You were able to go to school near your home, where she wasn't removed. She wasn't removed from home until very much later, but this was very much an early pilot education program that she was part of. So she was in the book. So I come from a very interesting socio-political background, because I've got a grandmother on one side that was a real activist, was very much about protecting and defending our homelands where we came from. And despite our efforts, we were first to move, and we moved to Flagstaff. So that is who I am, my clans, and we introduce ourselves in clans to let to connect with other Navajos, not only Navajos, but other tribal members or other bands, how we interact and how we relate to each other. So if there's another Navajo in the room, then we're like, oh, hey, you're so-and-so, we're related. But another part of my identity is I'm a mom. I identify as a mother first, and then, of course, an academic after that. But yeah, I identify as a mother first. I've got two boys. This is the one on the left over here is Jackson. And when I was doing my pictures for after I defended and doing the professional photos, we had the boys come with us. So all of my photos of me in my floppy PhD hat is with the kids. So I don't have I do have one really nice photo, but Jackson was going through this Batman phase at the time and put on his Batman mask. So I don't have a very professionally one, but that's okay, because that just kind of really visually represents our lives. So he is in the first grade, but the picture of me wearing his graduation hat when he was promoted to the first grade was pretty awesome. And the second one is Emmett, and he is the one who was crawling around here on the floor. He is definitely the one who is, he's 3. He's very good at being 3. But yeah, he's the one who's making our professional lives challenging right now, because one of us always has to be with him, or interacting with him, or, you know, really supervising him, because he can just like swiftly be in one place and then just gone, and we just don't know where he's at. And next thing you know, we hear the doorbell ringings because he's gone out the garage door, and it's like, you know, so he's very stealthy like that. So yeah, he's the one who's the most challenging. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is my educational background of where I came from. Like I mentioned, I was born on the reservation, and my very early childhood experience was in the boarding schools, but I was only there for a year. And I was in a boarding school where I was able to go to the boarding school, go get my education during the day, but then my dad or my grandma were able to take me home at night. I wasn't, you know, I have stories of being in the boarding schools. I was witness to some of the cruelty that had happened, but again, you know, everyone is experiencing this stuff. And when you're that young, you really just don't know. Like I was 5 or 6 at the time, and really was trying to, you know, you don't make sense of it when you're 5 or 6. I had family that I went to school with during the day. So, and of course, when you're seeing them being mistreated and being abused, you know, that becomes your norm. And it was really until I left that to go, when I was in the Flagstaff public school system, when it was completely different. I was one of the only brown kids at my school. In the first grade, I was very much one of the only brown kids in my school. And it was it was hard when you're going to predominantly nothing but Navajo kids in your kindergarten classroom or in your preschool classroom, and then going into an environment where you are exposed to other cultures other than your own. It's a culture shock, and I don't think I ever felt comfortable in my own skin until probably college, because Flagstaff is bordering on a border town. So you experience those different levels of racism, whether it be in the classroom or outside, inside the classroom or outside of the classroom. It was very much a part of my early education, which is what really directed me to go into education. I'd had experiences in like very early on with my elementary teachers, you know, being cruel and not knowing, because you're young, not knowing how to express the verbal abuse that you're going through, but also some of the racism from other schools, the derogatory remarks, all of that. Like, you don't know how as a little kid to share that, you know, because it becomes so much a part of your education that just kind of keeps on rolling, keeps on going and building up. But it wasn't until I think in college when I started going into the field of education, when I realized, oh my gosh, that was really messed up. That wasn't okay, you know. And knowing that had existed during my education, I knew it probably existed for other students, for other Native students, but also non-Native students, for students of color, which really made me reflect on going to into the education field. So I wrote my essay to the College of Education, because you have to write your essay to apply. And I did, and I wrote my essay entirely on this one experience that I had with my third grade teacher, of how two of my third grade teachers pretty much bullied me. They pulled me aside and they were questioning about my attendance, where I've been, and I didn't even really understand the conversation, because I think it's something that they should have talked to my mother about, but they didn't. They were like asking me, and I'm in tears. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to move from this. So feeling that, and then there's other experiences, like in like the 5th or 6th grade, being harassed, being dealing with racist remarks from other students. It just got more difficult, but it became a part of the normal, and it just felt like at that point that it was, you just learn to cope, and you just learn to deal. So I applied to NAU and got my bachelor's in science in education. I became an art teacher, and from there I moved from Flagstaff to Seattle. That was my first time moving. I put Tucson, Flagstaff, and Seattle on here because these seem to be the places I keep on returning to. It's really this really strange effect of going from the desert, then back to the Pacific Northwest, then get back to the desert, then back to the Pacific Northwest. It's become a joke in my family, like, oh, where are you moving to next? It's pretty laughable at this point. I think I've counted how many, I think 32 different addresses at this point. So when I am, like, I forget, like, if I'm logging into like a website and it wants to check like to make sure that I'm verified as, Georgina Badoni, and they said, which addresses is the correct one? I'm like, I don't know at this point. So it's really kind of funny how many addresses I've had. But I graduated, went up to Seattle, taught there for a couple of years, and I wanted to return back to Flagstaff, and I had applied for this position, a teaching position, up at Moenkopi Day School, which is bordering. It's in Tuba City, but it is really on the borders of the Hopi Reservation and where the Navajo Reservation meets. There is this section in Tuba City where the two reservations meet, and that's where I was teaching. I was working for the Hopis, but living on the Navajo side, so it was very complicated, but it was awesome. So I taught art up at the Hopi Reservation for a couple of years, and during my time there, I realized that they had never had an art program before. And with my students, there was so much talent. So I got involved with the Museum of Northern Arizona and some other art centers in Flagstaff, and was able to showcase my students' work. And during that time, there's such a big response, not only personally for my students, about what confidence they're able to develop from creating art or talking about their art, or their art being celebrated and acknowledged. But it also been this, I also felt like, okay, my students are doing great, but like, how do I connect the community and my students' artwork to the larger museum education field? So I started thinking about it, and I realized, like, this is something I don't know about. So I applied to graduate school, and I ended up in Tucson. And at the University of Arizona, and completed my master's program with their art and visual culture education there. And they have a museum education emphasis, a community and museum education emphasis certification part of their master's program. So I applied, I got in, and it was amazing, because, like, I think through my previous education, training, it was so limited. It was all about like making art, talking about art history, making art, and not really digging deeper into the context of art or even culture related to culture. So it really opened my eyes. It was a really awesome program. I had a fantastic mentor advisor at the University of Arizona. She's retired this year, Dr. Elizabeth Garber, and I call her Dr. Garber like always. It just becomes like this level of respect for me of like what. So even though like she was on my dissertation committee, and I remember after I defended successfully, she pulls me aside. She says, "You can call me Elizabeth now." She's like, "It's okay." I'm like, "Nope, sorry. I just don't. I'm not there yet. I think maybe perhaps if I've got more years under my belt, then maybe I'll be at the level of, you know, being her, being her colleague at that point. But like I think will feel like a student to her. So I think it was a remarkable program. It allowed me to explore cultures, but also very contemporary ways of material and teaching about material. My thesis during the time was looking at Native American skateboards imagery and how that teaches oral history and how that can be used in the classroom. It was really great. I mean, like to be able to use skateboards like as your thesis, it was pretty awesome. And graduated during that a month before I defended my thesis. I went on a job interview up to Seattle at a tribal school. They were looking for an art teacher, and I went up there and I interviewed, and I totally thought I bombed the interview. I thought the person who's head of the committee was awful, and I was like, oh gosh, this is a terrible white guy, oh my gosh, and I was I left the interview and I got back into the rental car and I was crying. I cried. I was like, oh my God, I didn't get the job. Oh, what am I going to do? When a month before you graduate, you have no job prospects, and it was a horrible feeling. And, and like the next day I got a phone call that offered the position. I was like, oh yes, cool. Yes, I'll take the job, just because I was like, yes, I'll do it. So we moved from Tucson. Then back up to the Pacific Northwest again. So this is again another second time I'm up in Seattle. And I taught at the tribal school for 4 years. And the person who was on my committee, the person who was head of the search committee for that position, I'm married to. So it's pretty funny. So yeah, so he was, yeah. So my husband he's in human resources. So that's how we met. It's like, I thought and we shared that story because I'm like, oh man, I thought you totally hated me. He's like, no. He's like, that's my human resources face. So that's how we met, was working for the tribe. And we had Jackson, and Jackson was a great pregnancy. But right after he was born, I had post delivery paralysis. I was paralyzed for 6 months in my right foot. Right immediately, like after he was born, I asked for the epidural. They put it in my back, and they hit a nerve. And it's one of these things that you sign off on paperwork when you're in labor for like 4 days for a child that is just not wanting to get out of your body. You're gonna do it, you're gonna do it. So I did, and but we realized that, how am I going to take care of myself? Like, my husband had to go back to work. My parents were up in Seattle taking care of me, and they said, sorry, you're not doing this. So they packed me and Jackson up, and they said, we're going. So 2 weeks after he was born, we left Seattle, came back to Arizona, and I lined up some doctors up in Tucson through the University of Arizona Medical, and they're able to do testing, and they said, yes, they hit a nerve, but we don't know if you're going to get your nerve sensations back. So they hooked me up to like a car battery, and they said, well, it's not you did get some nerve damage, but you should be able to heal, but we don't know when. It could be 6 months from now, it could be 6 years from now. So I started doing physical therapy. And my husband at that point was like, I can't be without you and our newborn. So he just left. He just up and left, put what he could into a moving truck. My dad went back up there and came back, and that's how we ended up back in Tucson. And I started teaching art the first year back in Tucson. And one of my students says to me, you know, it's Halloween. She comes up to me. She says, hey, Ms. B. She said, hey, Badoni, guess what? Guess what I am? I'm like, oh, I don't know, you know. And she says, I'm an Indian. And she was wearing these faux moccasins, you know, the kinds you get at Target, and was wearing some, like, you know, southwesterny glittery shirt, and had painted, like, you know, put face paint on. And I was like, oh gosh. And I was like, oh, you know, I was like, oh, this is not good, you know, and like, this is terrible. Fall is always, I think, the worst month, the worst season for Native Americans, because you've got, you know, Columbus Day, you've got Thanksgiving, and of course, like, you've got Halloween, because, you know, all these things that happen, and it's still very much alive and practice. And I had shared a wall with the 4th grade teacher, and one day, you know, my classroom was stinking like onions and, you know, stuff, and I'm like, what is that? So I go next door to see what's going on. They are recreating a Thanksgiving feast. So I was like, oh, okay, that's it. This is it. Like, so I was like, you know, obviously my work is not done. And I started thinking more about going into applying for a program in Native American Studies, American Indian Studies. And I did. Since I was in Tucson, and they're one of the programs that did have Native American Studies. So I pursued it. And yeah, so I got in. That's how I started my PhD work with was in Tucson, and was there for a very for several years. But you know, when you're applying for a doctoral program and you've got a 2-year-old, you're thinking, how am I going to do this? You know, how am I going to be able to manage this? And you needed support. So I sought other women, other Native American women that were in my lives that had children that were doing the same thing. I said, you know, how do you go about this? And they shared with me, you need support. So my parents, who were in Flagstaff, moved in with us. They lived with us. They took care of our young one when I was going to school. My mom would get dinner started. So I had a great support system to complete my doctoral work. And I was a year into my program when we found out we were expecting our second child. And, you know, immediately we're like, okay, so when is he due? And they said, oh, he's due in July. We're like, yes, you know, he's due in July, right in the summertime, right before classes start back up again. And yeah, so I was working on my comprehensive exams when I was 5 months pregnant, and that was intense. And then just went ahead and kept on rolling with it. Just kept on doing my doctoral studies and my work. And he was born in July, and less than a month later, I'm back at school finishing up my last year. So yeah, that's how that came to be. And went back up to Seattle after I graduated in 2017. Took a position as a consulting teacher with Seattle Public Schools. Worked with the Native Education Program as a consultant for non-Native teachers to teach about Native American content, develop curriculum for Seattle Public Schools, worked closely with the Superintendent Juneau on curriculum development and professional development for Native and non-Native teachers. And that was my work for 2 years. And during that time, there was always that, okay, well, how can I really focus in on what I'm trained to do. The Native American Studies always was a key component into Native curriculum, but what I really want to do was fully focus on Native American Studies. And Native American Studies, you know, those positions only come up so often in the year. And the New Mexico state was definitely very exciting because we want to return back to the Southwest because, you know, that's what I do. I go bounce back and forth. But a big part of it, you know, is to be closer to home because that's what you do. You return home. You know, being Native, I know that's what my family has always emphasized. And I've always wanted to come home because we've got 2 boys that need to be near their grandparents. And yeah, my mom is sick. She's in hospice care right now, and I haven't been able to see her since February. So she's not allowed any visitors. So I'm just kind of waiting it out. I'm glad she's healthy, and I'm glad she's safe. But that was one of the largest, one of the big reasons why we returned back to the Southwest. Yeah. So that's my academic journey of of going back and forth. Yeah, let me see. Is there? Yes. So this is our upcoming schedule of Native American Studies classes. So this is Dr. Pepiana and I's upcoming fall schedule. Hopefully we will be back into our campus, back into our classrooms by then. I am teaching 3 courses in the fall, which is Contemporary Native American, Indigenous Peoples of North America, and Native American Visual Culture. Oh, wait, Native American, I'm not teaching contemporary. I'm teaching contemporary during the summer, and then Dawn is teaching it in the fall. And I'm also teaching Native American women. I'm doing that course right now, but of course, like I think the official name of Native American women class is going to be starting in the fall. But currently it's under a different title, and Jesse's in that class. A lot of amazing readings. We actually used an NMSU alum book, Therese, what is it, Heartberries. And Michael, we've talked about you knowing her and placing some of Las Cruces and El Paso and Mesilla into the book. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, that was one of the great books that we used this semester, and I'll be using that again in the fall. Okay, I think we have some time for some questions. I think that was the next slide, was the questions.
Okay, so.
Oh, Georgina, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ray.
No, this is what I was gonna say. This is the process. Well, then we'll look at as how to start doing questions. So if you have questions, either you can also put them in the chat, or if you just want to raise your hand and we can look around visually to see who has their hand up, we can go into those older school methodologies of, you have a hand, raise your question, raise your hand up. But I think Don had one, so we'll go ahead and go to Don. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I never thought of raising hand. That's a good idea. Yeah, I was just curious, Georgina, and I don't know if you talked about this, but you know, how did you get into visual arts? And you talked about teaching art, and what was the motivation there? And are you an artist, and have you done that kind of thing? I'm just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, art was always something that I dabbled with. I became very interested when I must have been like, I was in elementary school. I had a pretty, this is one of my great stories is my elementary art teacher ended up being a high school art teacher and also an art education professor at NAU. So I kind of was following that. So there must have been something that she ignited in me. But I remember like doing pretty great projects. And one of my early pieces was made out of clay. I don't think it was, I don't even remember what I made. I think it was like a rabbit or something, but it was sold at the Herd. So at the Herd Museum, they had used to have an art show for students. And I think they still do have Native American student art shows where students are able to sell their work. And I remember my art teacher asking me if I wanted to sell. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, why not? So that was one of my early pieces. But I'm a painter. I also have I did a dual major at NAU, and I was a painter once. I would like to take it up again, but when you've got two children, I'm an oil painter, so I work with a lot of oil paints that that are permanent, but also the mediums that I use are like different kinds of oils and and paint thinners and all that stuff. When the kid's 3, like he's gonna just get into it. I'm already like stressing thinking about him, but yeah, he's 3. He's gonna get into it. So as of right now, I'm not practicing or making anything, but I'm definitely a supporter. I love buying art. I love wearing art. I've got a weakness for earrings.
Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, well, I'm going to raise my hand and use the thing of, I know one of the things we've been talking with students is that level of imposter syndrome and how sometimes it's not necessarily moving past imposter syndrome, but working with imposter syndrome. In that sometimes when we enter into new realms, as we go into profession, as we go into mentorship, as we go into areas, how we work with it. So when it comes to helping out incoming students, whether it be into the undergraduate role or into the graduate role, or even in the professional realm, what were some of those things that helped you move into those different areas and those different levels?
I think for me, I think students need that support, and what helped me overcome that was really having my parents so close to me. I'm so grounded in my own culture and my own traditional practices and language, all of that, and always having that, because I think I had land, my land taken away. So what I had left was something that I hold close and I stay connected with. So I was always able to find some type of external support to keep me grounded. It was my parents, it was other mentors, whether they be native or non-native. Like having those people that believe in you is really significant, because like some of my stories from elementary school, I didn't have that. And when I think about it, I'm shocked, because we know the trajectory, we know the statistics of graduation rates among Native Americans. And during those years, during my early career in education, I passed high school, but it wasn't something that I was, my grades during that time, my grade point average, my attendance was nothing that would, that showed what I am doing today. Like I know when I run into high school friends or someone I knew from high school way back in the day, when I'm Flagstaff visiting my family, they'll be like, oh hey, what are you doing? I'm like, oh well, I'm a professor now. And they're like, what? They're shocked. They're shocked because they didn't know. Like they had no idea, because they knew me as somebody else. And I thought about that. That's, yeah. So when I think about that, like it really, my belief in myself and someone else believing in me didn't happen until post high school.
Any other questions? Have their hands up?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to further the conversation of, one of the things we often talk about is hindsight being extremely 2020. So if you could go back and talk to your either high school self, freshman self, as a college student, junior self, what would you like to say when it comes to, like you mentioned, those words of encouragement or those strengths that you can utilize?
Yeah, I I think if I had to, say something to myself, it would have been back in probably middle school. Like, middle school is tough enough. It's awful. Like, I remember being in middle school, or maybe earlier. But you always think that your parents are always going to be there. You always think your parents are going to always, tell you things, share information with you, and they did, and they do continue to do that even today. But I think there was a point in probably middle school and adolescence where you just are like, I don't want to hear it, Dad. I don't want to hear it. Mom, I don't want to hear it. Like, don't tell me about that stuff. And that's just being a really young kid. But I think Native American programs are really significant, and they're really significant, not only at university level, um, but also in those early stages of the education system, because there are students like me. I mean, I had a home. I don't remember ever feeling like my life was lacking something. My parents were able to provide what they could, and that was enough for our family, and that was enough. But um, I think about, like, well, I had it great. Like, there's other students that didn't have it great. And those are the students, of course, we always try to reach, but also everyone needs that. Like, especially when you're in when you're not only a person of color, but a native kid. You're dealing with your own history, but you're dealing with your parents' history. You're dealing with your grandparents' history. That's all carried on your back. And and I think that was what my experiences were telling me, is like, these things had happened way before me, but I was still experiencing those in my own ways. So I think if I had to tell myself something early on, to be like, listen to your parents more. You should have been listening to your dad. you know Now I do. Now I do.
And for those who are looking at going into the professional career, when it comes to, I know you mentioned your significant other is an HR manager, what are some of the things that you wish somebody told you when going for that first job, or when going into those higher levels of administration or whatever it might be?
I think the more practice you have in those interactive realms, is great preparation for it. And always, like, have confidence in yourself. Like, um, you need to practice that build up. That build up, that stuff that goes in your head right before you walk into um, an interview, or having a meeting, an important meeting. You need to have some type of, like, speech, something internal that builds you up, and develop that. And students can do that in more interactive roles, like, whether you go to um, a club meeting, or go to an event on campus. Like, being able to interact on different levels of engagement is always important. See, there he is right there. See, there's the guy. Yeah, there's the guy. See, no. Yeah, I know. I was talking about how we met, about, like, how you hated me and I hated you.
I didn't hate her.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what I would say is, for students who are going into that professional level, give yourself more opportunities to network and develop those skills, and but also believe in yourself. That's the biggest part of it, is you're not always going to have your mom or your dad there to tell you what to do or what to say. You need to be able to do that on your own.
Don, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say before we go that, Georgina, we're really pleased that you came to work with us, and just to tell the rest of the folks, it was a big challenge because we had a lot of very good candidates from all over the United States and Canada for the position. But the other thing is, I appreciate you sharing some of your life with us. And some may not know this, but you know, as a professor in academics, you know, we're so much into what we do that it's very not a lot of time we have to share with each other at this kind of way, and I think that's really important. So I appreciate you sharing some of your life with us, and again, to be a Native American woman in academics as a professor is just a rare thing. So we're fortunate. And Ray, Michael, thanks for doing this. I mean, I think it's a great thing, and certainly wish we had more students to hear those stories because we're human too. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Pepion. And I know that's one of the things we were looking at in creating this kind of a space and environment to have these conversations shared, but also in making sure that we are equitable when it comes to not everybody has the resources for broadband internet in their community because of infrastructure. And this is why we wanted to record the conversation, because we always wanted to make sure that if it's downloadable going through this process, but also, again, like we were dealing with technology issues just a while ago, understanding that it's not going to be perfect the first time. It may not be perfect at some point further, but every time that we keep moving forward, we get that much better. And I think that was some of the things of working with the students is just because you may have been accepted to New Mexico State University or any other university does not mean that the world's knowledge of that institution is magically beamed into your head. And I know one of the things we've been looking at when it comes to the American Indian Center and the American Indian program at New Mexico State University is how do we engage the students to where they feel confident to utilize our resources, not just the American Indian program, but the other programs at our campus, to where they're maximizing their resources on our campus, wherever it might be. And we start looking at that social capital, as we talked about, of learning from others who have gone down that path and how we can sidestep those roadblocks that may be in our way, or find those detours and shortcuts that often come up in life. And we know that the road of life, that journey, it's not going to be a straight line. Sometimes there's setbacks, sometimes there's shortcuts where we might be in a great opportunity where we're having a conversation with somebody and they say, hey, there's an internship or there's a job available, or we never know when those opportunities will come on up. So that's why we want to talk about the networking aspect of sharing these stories. I know we mentioned how sometimes it's not feasible to be in many places. I know this time period I was double booked because I had another meeting that I usually help out and lead with. But we want to make sure that those opportunities are available, and that, again, we talked about the video. We understand it's not normal sometimes to see yourself, because usually you don't get to see that mirror aspect when you're in a classroom. I know Georgina and I were talking about it, that resting Zoom face, making that as a phrase of you get to now see what your professors might see. But as we move forward, we want to make sure that we're bringing the Zoom space that we are now existing in, not only just a classroom space or a business meeting space, but that community space for our students, our faculty, our staff that we have here at NMSU. But not only that, as we see, we have a participant from IU coming on in from across the country. And this is where we have those opportunities to expand beyond. And that's where we look forward to not only having them now when we're having the forced, but continuing having these Zoom interactions when we do have our on-campus events as well. Because as mentioned before, we have students who are on our NMSU online who will maybe never set foot on our campus but 3 or 4 times, but how we can also reach out to our Grants campus, our Alamogordo, Carlsbad, Albuquerque Center, and again, further bring that conversation closer to home, being that I know a lot of us are in our homes. And we thank you for inviting us into your homes, because this is one of those times where that may be just on a feast day or on a celebration. But now we get to invite people into our homes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. So in moving forward, when it comes to some of the things we wanted to spotlight, we will be continuing our What's Up Wednesdays. So if you went to our Facebook, our Instagram, or been a part of our AIP bulletin, we're going to continue having these conversation meeting spaces on Wednesdays to have the interaction of just being students. We had a couple of students in our last What's Up Wednesday talking about some of that difficulty of transitioning, not being able to be in the classroom, not even having that opportunity to, talk with their friends who might not have seen for a while. So we want to talk about some of those things, but also some of those achievements that we've been going through. There's been a lot of time to do a lot of side projects for students who might have been able to take on a part-time job during this time period, or maybe they're looking at working on, we've seen students who are looking at podcasts, who are doing digital filmmaking projects, who are doing all these different things, that they now have a little bit more autonomy to do that. So next week, in addition to our What's Up Wednesday at noon, we will also be highlighting one of our other newer faculty members from our Native American community, who is Dr. Brandon Hobson. So Dr. Brandon Hobson is in our English department in the College of Arts and Sciences, and he is the author of the book Where the Dead Sit Talking, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. So he will be on our virtual stage next Wednesday at 4 p.m. And one of the things is we get to know, I can get to ask him, hey, do you have a PowerPoint you wish to share with me beforehand? And, do you have all these different things that we've got to learn today? And hopefully, again, every one of these meetings we have will be that much better, to the point where what we were talking about earlier, as soon as we learn the best way to work, we're all going to be in our campuses. We're all going to be back into the classroom. But again, it's how we move forward with this and how we learn about new ways of incorporating the digital community into our in-class community. But just wanted to open it up. Anybody want to say anything, maybe introduce themselves? Because I know we had Dr. Badoni introduce herself, Dr. Pepion introduced himself. For me, I'm just a talking head right now, but my name is Michael Ray. I'm the director of the American Indian program here at New Mexico State University, for those who are not a part of my staff who are here. But everybody, if you have that opportunity, introduce yourselves as well. Okay.
Let me just unmute myself. Hi, I'm the person who's not from NMSU. Hi, I'm Kristen, and I'm a PhD candidate at Indiana University. And I was just interested in hearing a little bit more about the program and about Dr. Badoni's work. So I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Badoni, for sharing your trajectory with us today. It was a pleasure to hear about it and to hear a little bit more about your work with digital culture at NMSU. So thank you.
Who's next? Just do the show of hands.
Hi, I'm Samantha Gallegos. I'm a junior at NMSU. I'm majoring in elementary education, and I'm also a student assistant at the American Indian program. And I've taken one of your classes, and I really enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite.
Oh, Sam, I miss your face.
Yeah. Do you miss me asking you questions every day?
No, I don't. No, of course. Me, I need interaction. I need this. I need this, but I mean, I need it in person. The Zoom only can do so much. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're healthy. You look great. I miss your face.
Thank you. I miss you too.
I'll go next. I'm Brittany Stout. I'm the administrative assistant over at the American Indian Program. I work with both Sam and Michael, and of course, Dr. Pepion and Dr. Badoni. They are constantly, well, not constantly, they're frequently in the building. And it's nice to be able to see them again since we've been apart for so long. It's it's just like, oh, you're still there. Virtual hugs. But hi, everybody.
Okay, Don, you want to go? Okay. Okay, well, Van, you're the only one who hasn't gone through.
Hi, I'm Jessie Van Manen. I'm a graduate student in the anthropology department, and that's how I found out about this talk today. Last semester, I had Badoni for visual anthropology, and this semester, I have her for Women's Studies 533, which is what is going to be called next semester, the Native American Women course. So I just wanted to learn some more, and it's been really fun.
Awesome. Well, I think that rounds out everybody. Well, definitely, we're going to have future events where we do incorporate the Zoom environment, and again, hopefully they always get better each event. And it's kind of like we talked about when it comes to that generational effect. You know, we always want the next generation to have it that much better than we've had it. Because Dr. Badoni talked about her career in academia. Hopefully, we'll get Dr. Pepion to talk about his career in academia. But we, as the American Indian Program, we always want to make sure that our current students, our future students, will have that opportunity to gain knowledge from those who have that ability to share their stories. Because our stories, as we talked about, the other meeting I was supposed to be in, we were talking about the narrative, rewriting our narrative, being that we have multiple identities sometimes, because the identity we have in the classroom is sometimes completely different from the identity that we have with our friends, which is completely different from what we have in our church communities, our family communities, and whatever it be. So how we navigate into those areas. But I just want to thank everybody for attending again. We're going to be looking at having this posted up on our website, aip.nmsu.edu. We're going to be looking at creating a YouTube page. So definitely, if everybody wants to go ahead and put their best smile on, we can go ahead and do a snapshot. That way we can show that, yeah, we all came together. We had a good turnout. And it's one of those times where it happened. We didn't just put up a flyer and said it happened, but it actually happened. Now, if I can get my Mac key combinations. Awesome. So, Dr. Badoni, any last remarks? You're muted at the moment.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for joining on this evening. I really appreciate it. Sam, it's always great to see you. Jessie, of course. We've got so much more. I wish we could meet in person so we can go ahead and just talk. I really need the interaction. I really miss it, and hopefully I'll be able to see everyone on campus in the fall, so we can get back to some level of normalcy. So, but be well, stay healthy.